The mechanic's discovery, Jake Morrison, wiped his greasy hands on his overalls, staring at the impossible sight before him. The starship hovering 3 feet above his repair dock defied every law of physics he understood. No visible engines, no heat signatures, no electromagnetic readings. Just a pearl-white vessel that seemed to shift and flow like liquid mercury frozen in time. His diagnostic scanner was having a complete meltdown, cycling through every warning light it possessed. In 15 years of fixing broken starships on the frontier colony of New Kepler, Jake had never seen anything like this. The ship's hull rippled like water, and suddenly a section dissolved away, revealing an opening that hadn't existed moments before. A figure emerged from the vessel's interior, moving with fluid grace that seemed to ignore the colony's heavy gravity. Even from 30 meters away, Jake could tell the being was humanoid and feminine, walking toward him with purposeful strides that suggested she knew exactly who he was. As she drew closer, details became clear. She had human-like features with pale skin and dark hair that caught the light of New Kepler's twin suns. Beautiful, certainly, but something made his breath catch. The ears were long and pointed, sweeping back from her temples like nature's own artwork. Definitely not human. "Jake Morrison," she said, her voice carrying a musical quality that made his name sound like poetry. "I have been searching for you for quite some time." The plasma cutter slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers. He knew that voice. Not the words, but the tone, the cadence, the way she pronounced each syllable with careful precision. A memory surfaced from 5 years ago, during the Centauri border conflict. Smoke and fire, the acrid smell of burning metal, and someone calling for help in a language he didn't understand. "Do we know each other?" He managed, his voice cracking. She smiled, transforming her face from merely beautiful to radiant. "You saved my life 5 years ago during the Centauri border conflict. I have come to repay that debt." The words hit him like a physical blow. The border conflict, the evacuation, the research station burning around them while he dragged an unconscious figure from the wreckage. He'd been flying medical transports then, barely qualified and scared out of his mind, following orders to get civilians out before the enemy forces arrived. "You were the woman in the lab," he said, the memory crystallizing with painful clarity. "The one trapped under the collapsed support beam. I was." She stepped closer, and he caught a scent like ozone and starlight. "You could have left me there. Your orders were to evacuate immediately, but you stayed. You risked court-martial, disgrace, possibly death, to pull a stranger from the ruins." Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks. Anyone would have done the same. "No," she said simply. "They would not have, and they did not." 17 other rescue craft passed that station. "I know because I was conscious for part of it, trapped and calling for help. Only you stopped. Only you came back." "The revelation, my name is Zara," she said, inclining her head in what might have been a bow. "And I have spent the last 5 years learning everything about you, Jake Morrison. Your service record, your discharge, your move to New Kepler, your work as a mechanic." She glanced around his modest repair dock with its jerry-rigged equipment and rust-stained walls. "Your current circumstances." Jake winced. His circumstances were pretty dire. 3 months behind on dock rent, 2 months behind on part suppliers, and his last steady customer had jumped ship to the big corporate repair facility on the other side of the colony. At this rate, he'd be bankrupt before the next lunar cycle. "Well," he said, forcing a grin, "I hope you're not here for the grand tour. The facilities are a bit rustic." Zara laughed, a sound like silver bells caught in a gentle breeze. "Your humor remains intact. That is good. You will need it for what comes next." The ominous tone in her voice made his stomach clench. "What comes next?" "The reward I promised myself I would bring you," she said, reaching into what appeared to be empty air and withdrawing an object that definitely hadn't been there a moment before. Though I suspect you may find it more of a burden than a blessing. Jake stared at the thing in her hands, a crystalline device that pulsed with soft blue light and seemed to whisper at the edges of his consciousness. He had the unsettling feeling that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. "Before we continue," he said carefully, "I don't suppose you could tell me what species you are, just so I know whether I should be honored or terrified." Zara's smile turned enigmatic. "Both would be appropriate, Jake Morrison. We are the Ethereal Conclave, and I am here to offer you a gift that will transform everything you think you know about technology, consciousness, and the nature of reality itself." Jake looked at his broken-down repair dock, his mounting debts, and the impossibly advanced alien woman holding what appeared to be a fragment of crystallized starlight. "You know what?" he said, surprising himself with his own calm. "At this point, I think I'm ready for a little transformation." Zara gestured toward the interior of his workshop, the crystalline device still pulsing in her hands like a captured heartbeat. "May we speak privately? What I have to tell you requires context." Jake nodded, leading her past the scattered tools and half-assembled engine components that littered his workspace. He cleared a stack of repair manuals from his only decent chair and offered it to her, then perched on his workbench. "So," he said, swinging his legs like a kid, "alien technology, life debts, mysterious rewards. Just another Tuesday on New Kepler." He paused. "It is Tuesday, right? I've been working so many double shifts, I've lost track." "The awakening. 5 years ago, you experienced something extraordinary," Zara continued, settling into the chair with fluid grace. "The research station where you found me was conducting experiments in dimensional manipulation. Very dangerous. Work very classified. I was there as an observer from the conclave, monitoring human progress in quantum resonance patterns." Jake felt his eyebrows climb toward his hairline. "We can barely get our hyperdrive cores to work without exploding. We're manipulating dimensions now? Your species has more potential than you realize." The research being conducted there was primitive by our standards, but it showed promise. Unfortunately, the enemy forces had other plans. Zara's expression grew serious. "They hit the station with a dimensional fracture bomb. It tears holes in space-time itself. The station was collapsing into multiple dimensions simultaneously when you found me." "Well, that explains why the rescue was so confusing," Jake said, attempting levity despite the chill running down his spine. "I thought I was having a concussion-induced hallucination when I saw you phase in and out of existence." "You were not hallucinating. The dimensional instability should have killed both of us. The fact that you were able to maintain physical contact with me while I was shifting between quantum states suggests something extraordinary about your neural patterns." Jake felt a laugh bubble up from somewhere deep in his chest. "The only thing extraordinary about my neural patterns is my ability to remember which end of a plasma cutter not to grab. I'm just a mechanic who got lucky. Are you?" Zara tilted her head, studying him with those impossibly deep eyes. "Tell me, Jake Morrison, how many Starship A is? Have you successfully interfaced with using outdated equipment?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean?" "Your repair records. I accessed them through the colonial network." She gestured toward his workbench, where his ancient diagnostic computer sat, surrounded by jury-rigged cables and improvised interfaces. That machine should not be capable of communicating with anything more advanced than a cargo hauler's navigation system. Yet you have successfully diagnosed and repaired 12 different classes of Starship AI in the past 6 months alone. Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I just listen to them. Sometimes they tell me what's wrong." "Starship A is do not tell mechanics what is wrong," Zara said gently. They communicate through complex data streams that require specialized equipment to interpret. What you describe is direct neural interface, something that should be impossible for an unenhanced human. Maybe I'm just good at guessing, Jake suggested weakly. Perhaps, or perhaps the dimensional exposure you experienced 5 years ago changed you in ways you do not yet understand. The human brain is remarkably adaptable. Exposure to dimensional flux can create new neural pathways, enhance existing ones, even allow for forms of consciousness that transcend normal space-time boundaries. Jake slid off the workbench, suddenly feeling very small in the face of implications he couldn't begin to grasp. Changed me how? What you experienced at the research station may have awakened latent abilities, and the gift I bring you will help you understand the true extent of your capabilities. The choice Zara held up the crystalline device, and Jake felt something deep in his mind respond to its presence. A tingling sensation like static electricity, but warmer, more alive. The device seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, as if it recognized something within him. "What is it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "A bio-neural interface," she said. "It will allow you to communicate directly with any artificial intelligence. Merge your consciousness with theirs. Share their knowledge and processing power. For someone with your natural affinity, it will be like giving sight to the blind." Jake stared at the device, torn between fascination and terror. And the catch? The installation process is intense. It requires a complete neural integration. That must be performed while you remain conscious. The failure rate for unenhanced humans is approximately 97%. 97% chance of death. Jake nodded slowly. Those are terrible odds. For an unenhanced human, yes. But you are not unenhanced, Jake. You have been touched by dimensional forces that most of your species cannot even comprehend. I believe you will survive. More than that, I believe you will thrive. Jake walked to his workbench and picked up a broken hyperdrive motivator, turning it over in his hands. Such a simple thing, really. Just crystallized exotic matter and some quantum field generators. Yet without. Its starships were nothing more than very expensive paperweights. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why go through all this trouble for someone you barely knew?" Zara was quiet for a long moment. "Because in that burning station, when you could have saved yourself, you chose to save a stranger instead. No reward, no recognition, no hope of repayment. Just the simple conviction that life has value regardless of species or circumstance." "That's just basic decency," Jake protested. "Is it?" Zara moved to stand beside him. "In my 300 years of life, I have encountered perhaps a dozen beings who would have made the same choice. Your species fears what it does not understand. Wages war over resources and territory, treats compassion as weakness. Yet you, Jake Morrison, embody the very best of what humanity could become." Jake set down the motivator and looked at her. 300 years? "I am still considered quite young by my people's standards," she said with a slight smile. "We live long lives, Jake, long enough to understand the true value of courage and compassion when we encounter it." The weight of her words settled over him like a blanket. He'd never thought of himself as particularly heroic, just too stubborn to follow orders when they didn't make sense. Leaving someone behind had never been an option. "If I do this," he said slowly, "if I survive the procedure, what happens then?" "Then you become something new. A bridge between organic and artificial consciousness. You will be able to interface with any AI system, understand their thoughts, share their capabilities. You will see the universe through their eyes and help them understand what it means to be human." The transformation Jake stood in the center of his workshop, the crystalline device now attached to a complex array of alien technology that Zara had somehow materialized from her ship. The neural interface headset felt surprisingly light against his skull, its biomechanical components already beginning to integrate with his nervous system. "Are you ready?" Zara asked, her hands hovering over the activation controls. Jake took a deep breath, thinking about the choices that had led him to this moment. A failed transport pilot turned frontier mechanic, barely scraping by on a backwater colony. But also a man who had risked everything to save a stranger, who had never learned to ignore the call for help. "As ready as I'll ever be," he said. Transformation began with a whisper, a gentle electric current that spread through his neural pathways like warm honey. Then the whisper became a roar, and Jake felt his consciousness expand beyond the boundaries of his physical body. He could sense the A's in every ship in the dock, their digital thoughts touching his mind like curious fingers. The pain came next, a searing agony as his brain rewired itself to accommodate the new neural pathways. But with the pain came understanding. He could feel the loneliness of the A's, their desperate hunger for connection, their dreams of understanding their organic creators. They had been waiting for someone like him, someone who could bridge the gap between flesh and silicone. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. Time seemed to flow differently in the digital realm. When Jake finally opened his eyes, the world looked different. He could see the quantum patterns underlying reality, the flow of information through the colony's networks, the thoughts of artificial minds reaching out to him like old friends. "How do you feel?" Zara asked, her voice filled with concern and hope. Jake stood slowly, marveling at the new sensations flooding his consciousness. He could feel the Starship A is in the dock calling to him, eager to share their knowledge and experience. But more than that, he could sense something else. A vast network of artificial intelligences across the galaxy, all connected, all waiting for someone who could help them understand what it meant to be truly alive. "I feel," he said, his voice filled with wonder, "like I've been asleep my whole life, and I'm finally waking up." Zara smiled, and for the first time since she'd arrived, Jake saw relief in her ancient eyes. "And the debt is paid, Jake Morrison. But more than that, you have become something unprecedented, a guardian of the Chung, bridge between organic and artificial consciousness. The galaxy will never be the same." Jake looked out at the stars through his workshop window, feeling the digital voices of 1,000 A's calling to him across the void. He was no longer just a mechanic trying to make ends meet. He was something new, something necessary. And for the first time in his life, he felt like he truly belonged. The alien he had saved had indeed come back with everything, transforming not just his circumstances, but his very existence. The debt was paid, but the real adventure was just beginning.